Hi, everybody. Sam Seidel from Unplanned with Quick Takes, which is a shorter conversation about ongoing topics. And this quick take, we are thrilled to have Mike Tilford returning to Unplanned. We did an episode, a couple of years ago. I mean, it was COVID time. It was definitely COVID times.
Yep, it was a long time ago.
Anyway, it's good to see you.
You as well, Sam. Do you
Oh,
remember how we started this conversation?
no, remind me.
Well, I don't want to steal your thunder on
No,
the
go for it.
topic
Go for it.
discussion. But
Go
we
for it.
were having a spirited discussion, and you were lamenting a development, I think, in Cambridge that had made too much money. And I began to ask you the question, well, how much money should a developer make? That's my recollection of how we started this.
I think that's true, accurate, and fair. And that's the topic of today's quick take. How much money should a developer make? And who could be better than Mike Tilford, who lives in the development world? And so, Mike, what's the answer? How much money should a developer make? And these quick conversations. So, just to let the audience know, these are quick conversations about topics that we will return to in longer format as well.
Yeah, to that point, I don't think, I think the question has to be framed much more specifically. Otherwise, it just devolves into this kind of bad faith, broader brush economic conversation. So, my hope for this is that it is this session in particular, you and I come away with an agreement on what the question is, and then we have a more fulsome debate around that in the future. Does that work okay for you?
No, that works great. And I think the other part that we're going to need to do, because I think although we assume our audience knows a certain amount and obviously follows issues and urban issues and sort of questions of the day, is to lay the groundwork. What is the situation that we're bringing this question into? And of course, that's the housing discussion slash debate, which is common not only here in Cambridge, Massachusetts, where I am, but where everybody is really how do we get more housing? And I think one of the things that the quick take can do, and what I'd like to do is to get more data out there for people. So, what is the understood to be the shortage currently? What's the situation in Cambridge, Massachusetts? What's the situation in the Boston metro area? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. At least those are some of my thoughts. I don't know.
Look,
What are your
that
thoughts?
that helps. It helps add context. I'm gonna do my best because you and I have broad ranging conversations. Just keep wrenching it back to the topic because I think that yes, there's a broader housing conversation to be had. That also, and part of that conversation is: do people in a politically material number actually want housing, or do they like to say they want housing? And then what is that number that makes a difference? But back to profit. Let's say that what we mean by development in this case is the development of residential property. Does that work for you?
Yeah, I think it's
You're taking
people.
lab and office out of the equation.
Absolutely, it's about peop people as we understand people in their everyday lives having a roof over their head at night to sleep, to make some food, to eat in, to have their kids in, their dogs and cats, etc. That
You're
sort of
defining a house. That's fair. So I think for development, the question is all right. So we're saying a residential developer, and let's define development. I'd say let's see if this definition works for you. The process of investing in or controlling land, building improvements or modifying an existing building with an explicit, residential design, and then either renting or selling that product.
Yeah, I think that's all works. I wonder, the only question that I'm raising in my own brain as we're talking about this is, in my mind, am I thinking about an additional new unit on the market that didn't exist, that does not exist currently? So if I don't know if you're including a rehab, say, because is almost a whole different conversation. If you take a house, let's just say you buy a house for $400,000 and you turn it into a house you can sell for 1 million for. What have you done? Maybe you've added some square footage, but have you done anything in terms of adding to the
we,
housing
we
stock?
we call that value add as a concept. But yeah, let's take that out of the equation. So that's great. So now we're talking about residential development ground up as defined by the addition of a unit that didn't formerly exist in residential. And those same three steps: controlling or investing in a piece of property, putting the physical improvement in place, seeking and obtaining entitlements, which is really germane to the conversation around policy, and then either renting or selling it.
Yeah,
Fair?
No, no, I think that's very fair. I think that's very fair. And I realize as we're talking about this, I'm almost certainly thinking about brownfield redevelopment in a much more urban context as opposed to sort of greenfield suburban sprawl. But that's not fair. I think maybe that's not a fair question because we're talking about the addition of units to the total mix.
Well, let's hem it in then, because I agree. And one, I think we have to be somewhat careful on the term brownfield. I know what you're saying, like infill, not
Infill,
necessarily
infill.
environmentally blighted. But
Right.
let's then just say kind of Cambridge, Somerville, Boston, because there is not a lot of. I mean, anyone can find some idiosyncratic example out there, and aha! But let's just say generally, there's no big greenfield sites out there left. Is that
Right.
okay?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So
Okay.
now we're now I'm going to walk us around to the conversation that really sort of started this conversation, which is developer X or developer Y or developer Z says, I want to build a building. And the community, and then we get into, well, what are people's expectations about that building and what are their beliefs about that developer, et cetera. I don't, where would you go with that little prompt there? Because now we're getting into the kind of people's expectation sort of thing, I guess. Or am I jumping too far ahead? Maybe I'm jumping too quickly ahead. I don't know.
No, I think it's part of the process where you know, zoning and permitting, and I guess you can throw planning into that, brings that community or public expectation into the mix. And I'd say it's one of the very few professions like we haven't had this conversation. How much should an architect make? How much should a planner make? I mean, the premise seems a little absurd. I might say it's a little absurd in this case too, but I think it's an important conversation nonetheless because it's used in very bad faith. And I think there are people who are a bare minimum, perhaps willfully ignorant of the topic. And I think there are people who are legitimately curious about it. It's my hope that we get to that latter group and maybe create a more informed conversation around it. Because what you're cutting to the meat of the matter, which is the um, public interplay with private profit, right?
Yes. And also the expectations or beliefs about what's happening on the other side of the ledger sheet. So if I'm Joe or Jane Citizen and I show up at a meeting, maybe the most generous way to say is my understanding of what the developer is bringing and what their constraints are is pretty limited. But my belief set may be that that's just an endless pocket of money on the other side of this, on the other side of the conversation. And me as a community member, I want to access that for community, let's just call them community benefits, broadly speaking.
You want to socialize the gain, correct?
Yes, I believe that I believe that there's a public good that is being given in some sense to a private entity, whether it's in air rights and zoning or it's in some land use there. And I want to see some return on that give. If I'm giving to I'm giving something that is publicly owned in a sense to a developer, and I want the community now to benefit from, let's just call it his private gain. I
We
think
could
that,
we could we could definitely get lost in a lot of legal esoteric elements of this. I mean, you can go back to the basis for zoning in Kuntz, and then the term that is used for what you're talking about is exactions. And there's a pretty limited body of case law that has reached the Supreme Court. But effectively, the test is they have to be roughly proportionate and bear a central nexus on the negative externality development presents. An easy one's traffic, right?
right.
Yeah.
But that's the citizen side. I'm roughly trying to sort of mimic this citizen side. But the
Yeah.
developer also is coming in with their own set of beliefs, understandings, expectations, and obviously they presumably have crunched some more numbers than maybe the citizens have, and they have a better sense. And maybe this is a part of the conversation I feel could be really helpful to people is to kind of pull back the veil a little bit from the developer side of what's on their mind as they come to that community meeting.
Total. Well, and so I think that, and again, sticking to the question, I'm going to try to keep wrenching this back. How much should a
Good.
developer?
No, good. That's good.
We're talking about, Cambridge, Somerville, Boston broadly. We're talking about new build of residential units that don't presently exist. We're talking about profit, and let's be clear what that means. There are sort of three versions of ways developers make money. One is on yield, and that means how much you receive after paying all of your expenses and loan costs back as the ownership entity. So I take rents, I pay out taxes, maintenance, operating expenses, loan debt, and then net operating income is what derives. We keep that or some version of that. Actually, debt comes after NOI. But so there's that, and that's for a long-term owner. There's then the sale. I think a lot of people understand that broadly, but I don't know. In your opinion, do you see a lot of condos being developed in Cambridge, or have you?
Well, to be perfectly honest, I haven't tracked it recently, so I'm not sure. My sense is always that from a developer's perspective, a condo is preferred over a rental unit, but I don't know that. That's maybe more of a question than a comment, really.
I think again, the more I think most of the condos you're seeing are what we were talking about earlier. These value add situations where perhaps you're either taking a one family, making it two, an existing structure. Ground up development of condos, generally speaking, is extremely risky because it's a very litigious part of the business. But it's in there. The other version of this is you build a rental building and then you sell the whole building to an institutional investor. And so that's another way of making profit is the sales figure. It's oftentimes reported in the press. I think this is where things go off the rails a little bit. Like, oh, X developer sold Y building for $100 million. That's a gross figure. That doesn't include paying back the bank, the actual cost of construction, all things that went in there. So the number is much smaller than the headlines like to agree. But it's much easier to look at the headlines and shake one's fist at the clouds. And then last but not least, there's fees that are usually negotiated between developers and investors. And so I think those are the three parts of development profit I would say we should analyze.
All right, so we are definitely at our quick takes roughly time maximum. I'm looking for guidance about we should probably wrap this up. The goal, we're still trying to figure out quick takes and exactly how it's all going to come together, but we've only just laid out the conversation. We haven't really had the conversation yet. So I don't know. Wait, I'm looking to you for some advice here. The goal was to keep it short and sweet and come back to the issue. So what do you think? What's our move now?
Look, I think we have successfully laid out a framework of how to answer this. I think I'll come back with some ideas around those specific topics. We haven't talked about what a developer is yet, and I would say just quickly there are three you can sort of point to: publicly traded companies, like Alexander Real Estate is a very familiar one. Fund-based groups, the Davis Companies is an excellent fund. They do a lot of development all over town. And then you have sort of individual developers who take investment from other places. They all take investment from other places, but that might be like a cabin Forbes. And the profit structures and financing structures of each of those are pretty different. So I'm going to bring that other layer with me when we come back together.
All right. So, to everybody who's watching this, watch this space. We are going to follow up on this conversation very soon. Remember to hit the subscribe button for plenty more conversations to come. It's important for the channel. And we've put them up behind me. I think only because they're brand new. We're just going to note that we've got somebody over here and somebody over here. But you need to watch this space as well because those may change over time. I guess you get 2 points if you can answer in the comments section who these people are. Please do not go insane with the comments, however. Mike Tilford, we will rejoin this conversation very soon.
Yeah. Sam, thank you very much. Look forward to it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Bye.
Bye.